Looks a lot like mercy here. I see the
Woo! Nasty! Nasty! Oh my God! Woo!
Not some halo, not some distant sky, just a quiet grace in your tired eyes. If I get lost, if I lose my plan, teach me the heart of God in a human hand. Teach me the heart of God in a human hand. You said wisdom is an old man's hand. Joy is a child in the pouring rain. Beauty is your mother humming in the kitchen. Peace is breathing through the ache and the strain. Knowledge is a question you still keep asking. Courage is a tremble as you take the step. Morals are the lines that you draw in the shadow. Virtue is what you guard when you got nothing left. I see the image of the golden man in the way you love, in the way you stand. Not some halo, not some distant sky, just a quiet grace in your tired eyes. If I get lost, if I lose my plan, teach me the heart of God in a human hand. Character's a promise you make at midnight. Perfection is a crack where the light gets in. All these broken pieces on the table between us turn to something holy when you call me friend. I see the image of the golden man in the way you love, in the way you stand. Not some halo, not some distant sky, just a quiet grace in your tired eyes. If I get lost, if I lose my plan, teach me the heart of God in a human hand. Every scar, a little stained glass window. Every failure folded into prayer. If heaven has a face, I know it looks a lot like mercy here. I see the image of the golden man in the way you love, in the way you stand. Not some halo, not some distant sky, just a quiet grace in your tired eyes. If I get lost, if I lose lose my plan. Teach me the heart of God in a human hand. Teach me the heart of God in a human hand. I was chasing flawless, straight lines, clean hands. Try to polish every moment into something it could never stand. But wisdom came quiet, like rain on dry ground. Said you're not a finished statue, you're the clay I'm shaping now. I'm a perfect work in progress. Every scar, every step, every breath held inside your kindness. You're not asking me to impress. You call this beating, breaking heart, a mirror of your love. I was chasing flaws, straight lines, clean hands. Try to polish every moment into something that can never stand. But wisdom came quiet, like rain on dry ground. Said you're not a finished statue, you're the clay I'm shaping now. I'm a perfect work in progress. Every scar, every step, every breath held inside your kindness. You're not asking me to impress. You call this beating, breaking heart. Little cracks in my halo, coffee stain on my white shirt. Still I'm tracing every shadow for a hint of how you were. I keep tripping on my questions, set my heart on every doubt. Yeah, you're writing in the margins, lines I still can't figure out. You're the wisdom in my wonder, joy inside my aching chest. You're the beauty in the broken piece that lets my chaos rest. You're the courage in my shaking. You're the way my will grows kind. Perfect love, perfect reflection, drawing heaven through my life. I was taught a list of virtues, all the ways I had to shine. But you're patient with my missteps, turning rules to living light. Every scar becomes a teacher, every failure fertile ground. Slowly shaping softer edges, till your kindness shows in mine. You're the wisdom in my wonder, joy inside my aching chest. You're the beauty in the broken piece that lets my chaos rest. You're the courage in my shaking. You're the way my will grows kind. Perfect God, perfect reflection, drawing heaven through my life. Drawing heaven through my life. Not a static, flawless statue, but a heart that learns to stay when it's hard to can feel it glide. Making something bright and holy from this soul. Walking daily by your side, till your glory fills my little cracks in my halo, coffee stain on my white shirt. Still I'm tracing every shadow for a hint of how you were. I keep tripping on my questions, still my heart on every doubt. Yeah, you're writing in the margins, lines I still can't figure out. You're the wisdom in my words, and my aching chest. You're the beauty in the broken piece that lets my chaos rest. You're the curls in the sinking. You're the way my will grows kind. Perfect love, perfect reflection, drawing heaven through my life. I was taught a list of virtues, all the ways I had to shine. Be patient with my missteps, turning rules to living life. Every scar becomes a teacher, every failure through the ground. Slowly shaping self-awareness till your kindness shows. Okay, Rabbanu Shalom. Hello? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to read a book. It's going to be like a 30-minute meditation. I hope you enjoy. Rabbanu Shalom. We are almost finished with this book. We are getting closer and closer and closer and closer. Can I go to the...
Okay, this is the Isa Book Club. Reading wisdom by John Kitover. Ribono Shalom. This is going to be a 30-minute book reading, aka a meditation. We're sipping coffee. We're taking deep breaths. And we are about to engage with the Kabbalah. Oh, my friend is here. The Sheikh, going by another name. You know, I told somebody the other day, I was like, so are you going to take a layover in Palestine on your way to Iran, or are you going to take the layover in Pakistan? And they were like, huh? And I was like, I got a retarded friend who likes to make that joke. And they're like, huh? And I was like, never mind. Fuck off. And then he's like, oh, I'm married. I have kids. I'm retired. I'm rich. I'm this. I'm that. I'm just like, well, have a great night. Take care now. Hello?
That's what happens if you don't wear Teflon when you're supposed to.
Ribono Shalom. Should put some tefillin on. Okay, this is a book club. Here now on page 158. And there's 290 pages, so we got 130 pages to go. And then we'll be all done. It's very exciting. So take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for 10 seconds. Well, said he to his consultant, give me some details about your visions. What you tell me interests me in the highest degree. The sorcerer, for one must call him so. The sorcerer then told him of a series of strange facts of which two families had been witness, and these facts were precisely identical with the phenomena of Mr. Home. Hands coming out of walls, movements of furniture, phosphorescent apparitions. One day the rash apprentice magician had dared to call up Astaroth and had seen the apparition of a gigantic monster having the body of a hog and the head borrowed from the skeleton of a colossal ox. But he told all that with an accent of truth, a certainty of having seen which excluded every kind of doubt as to the good faith and the entire conviction of the narrator. Eliphas, who is an epicure in magic, was delighted with this find. In the 19th century, a real sorcerer of the Middle Ages, a remarkably innocent and convinced sorcerer, a sorcerer who had seen Satan under the name of Adonai. Satan dressed like a respectable citizen, and Astaroth in his true diabolical form. What a supreme find for a museum. What a treasure for an archaeologist. My friend, said he to his new disciple, I'm going to help you find what you say you have lost. Take my book. Observe the prescriptions of the ritual, and come again to see me in a week. A week later he returned, but this time the workman declared that he had invented a life-saving machine of the greatest importance for the Navy. The machine is perfectly put together. It only lacks one thing. It will not work. There is a hidden defect in the machinery. What was that defect? The evil spirit alone could tell him. It is then absolutely necessary to evoke him. Take care you do not, said Eliphas. You had much better say for 9 days this Kabbalistic evocation. He gave him a leaf covered with manuscript. Begin this evening and return tomorrow to tell me what you've seen, for tonight you will have a manifestation. The next day our good man did not miss the appointment. I woke up suddenly, said he, upon 1 o'clock in the morning. In front of my bed I saw a bright light, and in this light a shadowy arm which passed and repassed before me, as if to magnetize me. Then I went to sleep again, and some instants afterwards, waking anew, saw again the same light, but it had changed its place. It had passed from left to right, and upon a luminous background I distinguished the silhouette of a man who was looking at me with arms crossed. What was this man like? Just about your height and breadth. It is well. Go and continue to do what I told you. The 9 days rolled by. At the end of that time, a new visit, but this time he was absolutely radiant and excited as soon as he caught sight of Eliphas. Thanks, master, he cried. The machine works. People whom I did not know have come to place at my disposal the funds which were necessary to carry out my enterprise. I have found again peace and sleep, and all that thanks to your power. Say rather thanks to your faith and your docility. And now farewell, I must work. Well, why do you assume this suppliant air, and what more do you want of me? Oh, if you only would. Well, what now? Have you not obtained all that you asked for? And even more than you asked for you did not mention money to me. Yes, doubtless, said the other, sighing, but I do want to see him again. Incorrigible, said Eliphas. Some days afterwards, the professor of transcendental magic was awakened, about 2 o'clock in the morning, by an acute pain in the head. For some moments he feared a cerebral congestion. He therefore rose, relit his lamp, opened his window, walked to and fro in his study, and then, calmed by the fresh air of the morning, he lay down again and slept deeply. He had a nightmare. He saw, terribly real, the giant with the fleshless ox's head of which the workman had spoken to him. The monster pursued him and struggled with him. When he woke up, it was already day, and somebody was knocking at his door. Eliphas rose, threw on a dressing gown, and opened. It was the workman. Master, said he, entering hastily with an alarmed air. How are you? Very well, replied Eliphas. But last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, did you not run a great danger? Eliphas did not grasp the illusion. He already no longer remembered the indisposition of the night. Change, said he. No, none that I know of. Hey, Meta, start recording. Meta, start recording. Meta, record. Hello? A danger, said he. No, none that I know of. Have you not been assaulted by a monster phantom who sought to strangle you? Did it not hurt you? Eliphas remembered. Yes, said he, certainly. I had the beginning of a sort of apoplectic attack and a horrible dream, but how do you know that? At the same time, an invisible hand struck me roughly on the shoulder and awoke me suddenly. I dreamt then that I saw you fighting with Astaroth. I jumped up, and a voice said in my ear, "Arise and go to help of thy master, he is in danger." I got up in a great hurry, but where must I run? What danger threatened you? Was it at your own house or elsewhere? The voice said nothing about that. I decided to wait for sunrise. Immediately day dawned, I ran, and here I am. "Thanks, friend," said the Magus, holding out his hand. "Esteroth is a stupid joker. All that happened last night was a little blood to the head. Now I am perfectly well. Be assured then, and return to your work." Strange as may be the facts which we have just related, there remains for us to unveil a tragic drama much more extraordinary still. It refers to the deed of blood, which at the beginning of this year plunged Paris and all Christendom into mourning and stupefaction. A deed in which no one suspected that black magic had any part. Here is what happened. During the winter at the beginning of last year, a bookseller informed the author of the Dogme et Ritual de la Haute Magie that an ecclesiastic was looking for his address, testifying the greatest desire to see him. Eliphas Levi did not feel himself immediately prepossessed with confidence towards the stranger, to the point of exposing himself without precaution to his visits. He indicated the house of a friend, where he was to be in the company of a faithful disciple, Des Baroles. At the hour and date appointed, they went, in fact, to the house of and found that the ecclesiastic had been waiting for them for some moments. He was a young and slim man. He had an arched and pointed nose, with dull blue eyes. His bony and projecting forehead was rather broad than high. His head was dolichocephalic, his hair flat and short, parted on one side, of grayish blonde with just a tinge of chestnut of a rather curious and disagreeable shade. His mouth was sensual and quarrelsome. His manners were affable, his voice soft, and his speech sometimes a little embarrassed. Questioned by Eliphas Levi concerning the object of his visit, he replied that he was on the lookout for the grimoire of Honorius, and that he had come to learn from the professor of occult science how to obtain that little black book, nowadays almost impossible to find. "I would gladly give 100 francs for a copy of that grimoire," said he. "The work in itself is valueless," said Eliphas. "It is a pretended constitution of Honorius II, which you will find perhaps quoted by some erudite collector of apocryphal constitutions. You can find it in the library." "I will do so, for I pass almost all my time in Paris in the public libraries." "You are not occupied in the ministry in Paris?" "No, not now. I was for some little while employed in the parish of Saint Germain Auxerrois. And now you spend your time, I understand, in curious researches in occult science." "Not precisely, but I am seeking the realization of a thought. I have something to do. I do not suppose that this something can be an operation of black magic. You know as well as I do, Reverend Sir, that the Church has always condemned, and still condemns severely, everything which relates to these forbidden practices." Pale smile, Printed with a sort of sarcastic irony was all the answer that the abbe gave, and the conversation fell to the ground. However, the chiromancer des Barroles was attentively looking at the hand of the priest. He perceived that a quite natural explanation followed. The abbe offered graciously, and of his own accord, his hand to the experimenter. Des Barroles knit his brows and appeared embarrassed. The hand was damp and cold, the fingers smooth and spatulated. The Mount of Venus, or the part of the palm of the hand which corresponds to the thumb, was of a noteworthy development. The line of life was short and broken. There were crosses in the center of the hand, and stars upon the mount of the moon. Reverend Sir, said Des Barroles, if you had not a very solid religious education, you would easily become a dangerous sectary. For you are led on the one hand toward the most exalted mysticism, and on the other to the most concentrated obstinacy combined with the greatest secretiveness that can possibly be. Mm-mm-mm. My, oh, my, oh, my.
Message on your phone Message on your phone from Samantha Kitover. Message on your phone from Samantha Kitover.
Oh, I cracked myself up. Okay, this is page 164. I think this is where we left off. You want much, but you imagine more. And as you confide your imaginations to nobody, they might attain proportions which would make them veritable enemies for yourself. Your habits are contemplative and rather easygoing, but it is a somnolence whose awakenings are perhaps to be dreaded. You're carried away by a passion which your state of life. Pardon, Reverend Sir, I fear that I am overstepping the boundaries of discretion. Say everything, sir. I'm willing to hear all. I wish to know everything. Oh, well, if, as I do not doubt to be the case, you turn to the profit of charity or all the restless activities with which the passions of your heart furnish you, must often be blessed for your good works. The Abbé once more smiled that dubious and fatal smile which gave so singular an expression to his pallid countenance. He rose and took his leave without having given his name and without anyone having thought to ask him for it. Eliphas and Desbaroles reconducted him as far as the staircase in token of respect for his dignity as a priest. Near the staircase he turned and said slowly, "Before long you will hear something. You will hear me spoken of," he added, emphasizing each word. Then he saluted with head in hand, turned without adding a single word, and descended the staircase. The two friends returned to M.A.'s room. "That is a singular personage," said Eliphas. "I think I have seen Pierrot of the Funambules playing the part of a traitor. What he said to us on his departure seemed to me very much like a threat." "You frightened him," said M.A. "Before your arrival he was beginning to open his whole mind, but you spoke to him of conscience and the laws of the church, and he no longer dared to tell you what he wished." "Bah! What did he wish, then? To see the devil? Perhaps he thought I had him in my pocket?" "No, but he knows that you give lessons in the Kabbalah and in magic, and so he hoped that you would help him in his enterprise. He told my daughter and myself that in his vicarage in the country he had already made one night an avocation of the devil by the help of a popular grimoire. Then, said he, whirlwind seemed to shake the vicarage. The rafts groaned, the wainscoting cracked, the door shook, the windows opened with a crash, and whistlings were heard in every corner of the house. He then expected that formidable vision to follow, but he saw nothing. No monster presented itself. In a word, the devil would not appear. That is why he is looking for the grimoire of Honorius, for he hopes to find it in stronger conjurations and more efficacious rites." "Really? But the man is then a monster, or a madman?" "I think he is just simply in love," said Desbaroles. "He is gnawed by some absurd passion, and hopes for absolutely nothing unless he can get the devil to interfere." "But how then? What does he mean when he says that we shall hear him spoken of?" "Who knows? Perhaps he thinks to carry off the Queen of England or the Sultana Valide." The conversation dropped, and a whole year passed without M.A. or Desbaroles or Eliphas hearing the unknown young priest spoken of. I am running for Congress. I'm a write-in candidate. Is it the real Ray Cohen? You want to be my Ray Cohen? Oh, he left. Bono Shalala. In the course of the night between the 1st and 2nd of January 1857, Eliphas Levi was awakened suddenly by the emotions of a bizarre and dismal dream. It seemed to him that he was in a dilapidated room of Gothic architecture, rather like the abandoned chapel of an old castle. A door hidden by a black drapery opened onto this room. Take a little break here until the... Ray Cohen, my Ray Cohen. I've been looking for you, Ray. I need a Mr. Cohen. I like your style. I like the work you do. Be happy to have you be my campaign manager on this campaign. Thanks, Ray. I appreciate you. Okay, continuing on. A door hidden by a black drapery opened onto this room. Behind the drapery, one guessed the hidden light of tapers, and it seemed to Eliphas that, driven by a curiosity full of terror, he was approaching the black drapery. Then the drapery was parted, and a hand was stretched forth and seized the arm of Eliphas. He saw no one, but he heard a low voice which said in his ear, "Come and see your father, who is about to die." The Magus awoke, his heart palpitating and his forehead bathed in sweat. "What can this dream mean?" thought he. "It is long since my father died. Why am I told that he is going to die? And why has this warning upset me?" The following night, the same dream recurred with the same circumstances. Once more, Eliphas awoke, hearing a voice in his ear repeat, "Come and see your father, who is about to die." This repeated nightmare made a painful impression upon Eliphas. He had accepted for the 3rd of January an invitation to dinner in pleasant company, but he wrote and excused himself, feeling himself little inclined for the gaiety of a banquet of artists. He remained then in his study. The weather was cloudy. At midday he received a visit from one of his magical pupils, Viscount M. When he left, the rain was falling in such abundance that Eliphas offered his umbrella to the Viscount, who refused it. There followed a contest of politeness, of which the result was that Eliphas went out to see the Viscount home. While they were in the street, the rain stopped. The Viscount found a carriage, and Eliphas, instead of returning to his house, mechanically crossed the Luxembourg, went out by the gate which opens on the Rue d'Enfer, and found himself opposite the Pantheon. A double row of booths improvised for the festival of Saint Genevieve indicated to pilgrims the road to Saint Etienne du Mont. Eliphas, whose heart was sad and consequently disposed to prayer, followed that way and entered the church. It might have been at that time about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The church was full of the faithful, and the office was performed with great concentration and extraordinary solemnity. The banners of the parishes of the city and of the suburbs bore witness to the public veneration for the Virgin, who saved Paris from famine and invasion. At the bottom of the church, the tomb of Saint Genevieve shone gloriously with light. They were chanting the litanies, and the procession was coming out of the choir. After the cross, accompanied by its acolytes and followed by the choir boys, came the banner of Saint Genevieve. Then, walking in double file, came the lady devotees of Saint Genevieve, clothed in black with a white veil on the head, a blue ribbon around the neck, and the medal of the legend, a taper in the hand, surmounted by the little Gothic lantern that tradition gives to the images of the saint. For in the old book, Saint Genevieve is always represented with a medal on her neck, that which Saint Germain d'Auxerre gave her, and holding a taper which the devil tries to extinguish, but which is protected from the breath of the unclean spirit by a miraculous little tabernacle. After the lady devotees came the clergy. Then finally appeared the venerable Archbishop, Paris, mitred with a white mitre, wearing a cope which was supported on each side by his two vicars. The prelate, leaning on his cross, walked slowly and blessed to right and left the crowd which knelt about his path. Eliphas saw the Archbishop for the first time and noticed the features of his countenance. They expressed kindliness and gentleness, but one might observe the expression of a great fatigue and even of a nervous suffering painfully dissimulated. The procession descended to the foot of the church, traversing the nave, went up again by the aisle at the left of the door, came to the station of the tomb of St. Genevieve. Then it returned by the right-hand aisle, chanting the litanies as it went. A group of the faithful followed the procession and walked immediately behind the Archbishop. Eliphas mingled in this group in order more easily to get through the crowd which was about to reform, so that he might regain the door of the church. He was lost in reverie, softened by this pious solemnity. The head of the procession had already returned to the choir. The Archbishop was arriving at the railing of the nave. There the passage was too narrow for 3 people to walk in file. The Archbishop was in front, and the 2 grand vicars behind him, always holding the edges of his cope, which was thus thrown off and drawn backwards in such a manner that the prelate presented his breast uncovered and protected only by the crossed embroideries of his stole. Then those who were behind the Archbishop saw him tremble, and we heard an interruption in a loud and clear voice, but without shouting or clamor. What had been said? It seemed that it was, "Down with the goddesses!" But I thought that I had not heard right, so out of place and void of sense it seemed. However, the exclamation was repeated twice or thrice. Then someone cried, "Save the Archbishop!" Other voices replied, "To arms!" The crowd, overturning the chairs and the barriers, scattered and rushed towards the door, shrieking. Amidst the wails of the children and the screams of the women, Eliphas, carried away by the crowd, found himself somehow or other out of the church, but the last look that he was able to cast upon it was smitten with a terrible and ineffaceable picture. In the midst of the circle made large by the affright of all those who surrounded him, the prelate was standing alone, leaning always on his cross and held up by the stiffness of his cope, which the grand vicars had let go, and which accordingly hung down to the ground. The head of the Archbishop was a little thrown back, his eyes and his free hand raised to heaven. His attitude was that to which Eugene Delacroix has given to the Bishop of Liege in the picture of his assassination by the bandits of the Wild Boar of the Ardennes. There was in his gesture the whole epic of martyrdom. It was an acceptance and an offering, a prayer for his people and a pardon for his murderer. This is the subnote. Extract from Sir Walter Scott's notes on the murder of the Bishop of Liege. The bishop's murder did not take place till 1482. In the months of August and September of that year, William de la Marck, called the Wild Boar of the Ardennes, entered into a conspiracy with the discontented citizens of Liege against the Bishop Louis of Bourbon, being aided with considerable sums of money by the King of France. By this means, and with the assistance of many murderers and banditti who thronged to him as to a leader befitting them, de la Marck assembled a body of troops. With this little army he approached the city of Liege. Upon this, the citizens who were engaged in the conspiracy came to the bishop, and offering to stand by him to the death, exhorted him to march out against these robbers. The bishop therefore put himself at the head of a few troops of his own, trusting to the assistance of the people of Liege. But as soon as they came in sight of the enemy, the citizens, as before agreed, fled from the bishop's banner and he was left with his own handful of adherents. At this moment, Delamarque charged at the head of his men. With the expected success, the bishop was brought before Delamarque, who first cut him over the face, then murdered him with his own hand, and caused his body to be exposed naked in the great square of Liege before St. Lambert's Cathedral. 3 years after the bishop's death, Maximilian, Emperor of Austria, caused Delamarque to be arrested at Utrecht, where he was beheaded in 1485. The day was falling. The day was falling and the church was beginning to grow dark. The archbishop, his arms raised to heaven, lighted by a last ray which penetrated the casements of the nave, stood out upon a dark background, where one could scarcely distinguish a pedestal without a statue, on which were written these two words of the Passion of Christ, Ecce Homo. And farther in the background, an apocalyptic painting represented the four plagues ready to let themselves loose upon the world, and the whirlwinds of hell, following the dusty traces of the pale horse of death. Before the archbishop, a lifted arm, sketched in a shadow like an infernal silhouette, held and brandished a knife. Policemen, sword in hand, were running up. And while this tumult was going on at the bottom of the church, the singing of the litanies continued in the choir as the harmony of the orbs of heaven goes on forever, careless of our revolutions and our anguish. Eliphas Levi had been swept out of the church by the crowd. He had come out by the right-hand door almost at the same moment. The left-hand door was slung violently open, and a furious group of men rushed out of the church. Eliphas Levi had been swept out of the church by the crowd. This group was whirling around a man whom 50 arms seemed to hold, whom 100 shaking fists sought to strike. This man later complained of having been roughly handled by the police, but as far as one could see in such an uproar, the police were rather protecting him against the exasperation of the mob. Women were running after him, shrieking, "Kill him!" "But what has he done?" cried other voices. "The wretch! He has struck the archbishop with his fist," said the women. Then others came out of the church, and contradictory accounts were flying to and fro. "The archbishop was frightened and has fainted," said some. "He is dead," replied others. "Did you see the knife?" added a third coma. "It is as long as a saber, and the blood was streaming on the blade." "The poor archbishop has lost one of his slippers," remarked an old woman, joining her hands. "It is nothing, it is nothing," cried a woman who rented chairs. "You can come back to the church. Monsignor is not hurt. They have just said so from the pulpit." The crowd then made a movement to return to the church. "Go, go," said at that very moment the grave and anguished voice of a priest. "The office cannot be continued. We are going to close the church. It is profaned." Okay, we're going to read 2 more pages, and then we're going to shut this recording down. I hope you're enjoying this. It's called reading a book. How is the Archbishop, said a man. Sir, replied the priest, the Archbishop is dying. Perhaps even at this very moment he is dead. The crowd dispersed in consternation to spread the mournful news of Paris. A bizarre incident happened to Eliphas and made a kind of diversion for his deep sorrow at what had just passed. At the moment of the uproar, an aged woman of the most respectable appearance had taken his arm and claimed his protection. He made it a duty to reply to this appeal, and when he had got out of the crowd with this lady, "How happy I am," said she, "to have met a man who weeps for this great crime, for which at this moment so many wretches rejoice." "What are you saying, madame? How is it possible that there should exist beings so depraved as to rejoice at so great misfortune?" "Silence!" said the old lady. "Perhaps we are overheard. Yes," she added, lowering her voice. "There are people who are exceedingly pleased at what has happened. And look there, just now there was a man of sinister mien who said to the anxious crowd when they asked him what had happened, 'Oh, it is nothing. It is a spider which has fallen.'" "No, madam, you must have misunderstood. The crowd would not have suffered so abominable a remark, and the man would have been immediately arrested." Subnote: this man was presumably Levi himself, as the abominable authors of the grimoires concealed child beneath kid, so Levi is careful to disguise his true attitude to the church, which he wished to destroy. Okay, this will be the last page I'm reading. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe now. "Would to God that all the world thought as you do," said the lady. Then she added, "I recommend myself to your prayers, for I see clearly that you are a man of God." "Perhaps everyone does not think so," replied Eliphas. "And what does the world matter to us?" replied the lady with vivacity. "The world lies and calumniates and is impious. It speaks evil of you, perhaps. I am not surprised at it, and if you knew what it says of me, you would easily understand why I despise its opinion." "The world speaks evil of you, madam?" "Yes, in truth, and the greatest evil that can be said." "How so?" "It accuses me of sacrilege." "You frighten me." "Of what sacrilege, if you please?" "Of an unworthy comedy that I am supposed to have played in order to deceive 2 children on the mountain of Saletti." "What?" "You must be—" "I am Mademoiselle de la Maliere. I have heard speak of your trial, mademoiselle, and of the scandal which it caused, but it seems to me that your age and your position ought to have sheltered you from such an accusation. Come and see me, sir, and I will present you to my lawyer, Mr. Favre, who is a man of talent whom I wish to gain to God." Subnote: unless he were able to make himself invisible, as Levi, of course, could do. This is the point of his irony. Thus talking, the 2 companions had arrived at the Rue de Vieux Colombia. The lady thanked her improvised cavalier and renewed her invitation to come to see her. "I will try to do so," said Eliphas, "but if I come, shall I ask the porter for Millier de la Merliere?" "Do not do so," she said. "I am not known under that name. Ask for Dutric." "Dutric. Certainly, madam, and present my humble compliments." And they separated. The trial of the assassin began, and Eliphas, reading in the newspapers that the man was a priest, that he had belonged to the clergy of Saint Germain-l'Auxerrois, that he had been a country vicar, and that he seemed exalted to the point of madness, recalled the pale priest who a year earlier had been looking for the grimoire of Honorius. The description which the public sheets gave of the criminal disagreed with recollection of the professor of magic. In fact, the majority of the papers said that he had black hair. "It is not he, then," thought Eliphas. However, I still keep in my ear and in my memory the word which would now be explained for me by this great crime. You will soon learn something. Before a little, you will hear speak of me. The trial took place with all the frightful vicissitudes with which everyone is familiar, and the accused was condemned to death. The next day, Eliphas read in a legal newspaper the account of this unheard of scene in the annals of justice, but a cloud passed over his eyes when he came to the description of the accused. He is blonde. Okay, actually, we're just going to read one more page, so when I come back to the book, I won't duplicate the reading. This is the final page. It must be he, said the professor of magic. Some days afterwards, a person who had been able to sketch the convict during the trial showed it to Eliphas. Let me copy this drawing, said he, all trembling with fear. He made the copy and took it to his friend Desbaroles, of whom he asked, without other explanation, do you know this head? Yes, said Desbaroles energetically. Wait a moment. Yes. It is the mysterious priest whom we saw at, A's, who wanted to make magical evocations. Oh, well, my friend, you confirm me in my sad conviction. The man we saw we shall never see again. The hand which you examined has become a bloody hand. We have heard speak of him as he told us we should. That pale priest, do you know what was his name? Oh, my God, said Desbaroles, changing color. I am afraid to know it. Well, you know it. It was the wretch Louis Berger. Some weeks after what we have just recorded, Eliphas Levi was talking with a bookseller whose specialty was to make a collection of old books concerning the occult sciences. They were talking of the grimoire of Honorius. Nowadays it is impossible to find it, said the merchant. The last that I had in my hands I sold to a priest for 100 francs. A young priest. Do you remember what he looked like? Oh, perfectly, but you ought to know him well yourself, for he told me he had seen you, and it is I who sent him to you. No more doubt then the unhappy priest had found the fatal grimoire. He had done the evocation and prepared himself for the murder by a series of sacrileges, for this is in what the infernal evocations consist according to the grimoire of Honorius. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this book reading. Never had one lesson.